This happened almost 2 years ago. At the time, I was working as a park ranger in a massive wilderness region that I 1T named for privacy reasons. It wasn't a very popular forest compared to others in the state, even though it was huge and thick with trees. Because it didn't get many visitors, there were only a handful of rangers assigned to cover the entire area. My responsibilities changed every day. Most of the time, I was hiking out to remote campsites, cleaning up trash, checking for safety hazards, or occasionally helping with search and rescue calls for lost or injured hikers. Since the park allowed overnight camping and long backpacking trips, there were always a few rangers assigned to night shifts in case something went wrong. I usually worked odd hours, sometimes finishing around midnight, and other times not until 3 or 4 in the morning. On this particular day, I spent most of the afternoon at a secluded campground deep in the park, doing routine maintenance and making sure everything was in good condition. I rode an ATV most of the way down the trail, but once it became too steep and rough, I had to park it and hike the rest of the distance on foot. When I reached the campsite, I didn't see a single tent or person around. It was completely empty, just me and the forest. I headed out shortly after sunset, walking back through the dark to my ATV, and then carefully driving it back to the small ranger lodge where I was stationed. The lodge was basically just a tiny cabin with a wood stove, a desk, and a heavy-duty radio used to contact other rangers or local authorities. About an hour after I got back, the rain started pouring down. Storms were pretty common in that area, so at first it didn't feel unusual. I made myself a cup of coffee and sat at the desk, writing up notes about the condition of the campground I had just checked. A couple of hours went by quietly, until the radio suddenly crackled to life and another ranger's voice came through, asking if I was still at the lodge. I picked it up and asked what was going on. He asked if I had seen anyone at the campground earlier. I told him I hadn't known people, no tents, no signs that anyone had been there recently. There was a long silence on the line, probably around 30 seconds, before he finally spoke again. His voice sounded hesitant as he said he might need me to head back out there and look around. He didn't sound overly concerned, but the ranger station had received a satellite SOS signal from someone, and the coordinates matched the trail I had just been working on. Since I was the closest ranger, the call was mine. Everyone else was at least an hour away, so I'd be going alone. He also mentioned there were no follow-up messages from the device. Normally, when an SOS alert comes in without any text or replies, it turns out to be accidental. Sometimes those devices get pressed inside a backpack without the person even realizing it. Still, protocol says we always check, just in case someone is actually in trouble. Unfortunately, this was happening on a night when the rain was coming down hard. I grabbed my radio, threw on my rain jacket, strapped on a headlamp, and took a heavy-duty flashlight with me before stepping outside. Using the ATV wasn't an option in that weather. It would have gotten stuck before I even reached the trail. I double-checked the general location of the signal with the other ranger, and he told me it was about 2 miles up the trail. Because it was only a single ping, they had no way of knowing which direction the person might have been traveling. The hike took nearly 45 minutes, which was actually pretty fast considering the conditions. Still, I kept thinking about the possibility that someone was out there, wandering around in that storm, maybe an inexperienced hiker who had no idea what they were doing. Even with my powerful headlamp, flashlight, and familiarity with the area, the forest was incredibly hard to navigate in that weather. The trail kept disappearing under mud and debris, and without proper gear, being out there would have been extremely dangerous. When I reached the area, I walked slowly along the trail, sweeping my flashlight across the trees. Suddenly, the beam caught a figure standing in the woods. My heart nearly stopped. He was extremely close, maybe 10 feet off the trail. He was completely soaked, with long hair hanging over his face, and no rain jacket or gear. He looked confused, but strangely alert. I shouted over the rain, telling him I was a ranger and asking if he was okay. He didn't respond, Stu just stood there, staring at me. That's when I realized he had no backpack or supplies at all. I couldn't see any satellite device either, which I expected if he had sent the SOS. I told him my lodge was only a few miles away and waved him toward the trail. But instead of coming toward me, he suddenly turned and ran deeper into the forest. Within seconds, he disappeared into the darkness. I radioed the other ranger and told him I had seen someone and described his condition. I didn't know whether to follow him or stay on the trail and wait for backup. While we were talking, the ranger suddenly told me to wait. When he came back, he said another SOS signal had just been detected in the same area, about a quarter mile away exactly where the man had run. I stepped off the trail, pushing my flashlight into the trees. I felt more shaken than ever before. After a few minutes, my flashlight hit something on the ground. A small device was glowing faintly. I recognized it immediately: Garmin's satellite messenger. Just then, I heard footsteps running to my right. I turned and saw the same man charging straight at me. I stepped aside and he tripped and fell, still reaching toward me. When I looked into his eyes, I felt a wave of fear. There was something empty and unsettling about them. I ran back toward the lodge, slipping in the rain. I radioed the other ranger and told him I thought the situation was suspicious. I locked myself inside the lodge until backup arrived. The next morning, they found the satellite device exactly where I had seen it, but the man was gone. I never found out where the device came from or who it belonged to. I stayed in that job for a while, but nothing like that ever happened again. Still, that night changed me. I'm convinced something very bad almost happened out there.